Hey you guys, this is Miss Carr. I'm here with your second video. The topic of this one is how to write good survey questions. So we have different methods that we can use to collect data. Those are observation and surveys. With observation, you are the data collector for all the parties involved. You are limited to only being able to record the data that you personally are able to observe or measure. With surveying, you involve other people in the data collection process. Using surveys allows us to be able to access the thoughts and feelings of those that we collect the data from, because otherwise there's no way for us to know what somebody's thoughts or feelings are without asking them, okay? And once we ask them, that's a survey. So at the end of the last activity, you were supposed to collect some data about happiness when completing different tasks. Since we involved the people we were collecting data from, this was a type of survey. So let's look at the data you collected and see what we may have learned. Now I'm going to show you some example data. And here's my example data. So one thing we notice when we look at the example data is that every person recorded their data in different ways. Some things that you notice are that the day that they responded or the day that they did the task, those are recorded differently. One person just put Monday, whereas the other three people put some form of the date. But you notice even those three people, one person just did 5/27, one person said May 25th, and another person said Wednesday, May 27th. So all of the ways that that was recorded are different. Even under the time, those are recorded differently. We have a person who is very precise, it looks like, and it says that they responded at 7:30 p.m. We had somebody else who was not quite so precise. They said it was about 4 p.m. And then we had somebody who just said it was 9:30. Well, we don't know if that was 9:30 in the morning or 9:30 at night. And then we had somebody who just gave a very general morning. Okay, so that could be anywhere from 3 a.m. maybe all the way up to 11:30 a.m. or somewhere in there, okay? So we don't know exactly what time that happened. And then we have the tasks that are listed here. Now, on this particular one, we didn't have anybody who did the same task, but even that, they could have recorded that differently. We could have had somebody that said washing dishes and somebody who just said dishes, putting away dishes, something like that, okay? So even those could have been recorded differently. And then we have the happy column. So some people put words to describe their level of happiness. So we have somebody who says they're not happy at all. I wouldn't be happy either if I was washing dishes. Or we have the person who is very happy, okay? But they use words to describe how they felt. Then we have this person here who used a smiley face. So that smiley face is that a symbol for happiness? Usually yes, but can we tell how happy they were? Okay, so if they were using, I'm assuming, a smile for happy and a frown maybe for not happy, they may have only been able to tell those two levels of happiness, not happy or happy. So they were kind of limited there. And then we have this person that put the number 2 to show their level of happiness. So how do we think maybe they were trying to show happiness by using a number? Okay, so maybe that person was trying to do like on a scale of 1 to 10 or a scale of 1 to 5. This is how happy they were. Okay, but we don't know that for sure because we don't have all of their responses to be able to kind of understand that range. Okay, now in real life, you would have all their responses and be able to look at it. But I want you guys to take a moment to look over the data that you collected. And remember, you're supposed to have 3 different people. You could have been one of the people and had 2 other people help you record data. But look at that data. Did each person record their data in a different way? Pause the video and take a minute to look over your data. So with our data recorded in different ways, it means that it's hard for us to analyze, especially if we have a data set that is considered big data. So on the first video, if you remember that Metro bike share, and it had like 30,000 something rows of data. So it's hard for us to look at it and analyze it, especially if it's all recorded differently, okay? And so remember, usually with big data, we're going to need a computer to help us analyze that data that we collect. If the data is recorded in different ways, like it is here, it makes it very difficult for the computer to analyze it or to process it or to organize it in any way so that that data can be useful for us. For example, here, how would the computer be able to figure out the difference in the happiness level between the person who said they are very happy and the person who used a smiley face? Which one of these people has the higher level of happiness? That's very hard for us to know, okay? And you could do the same thing here with the not happy at all to 2. Which one of these people are not as happy? So that's even difficult for us to figure out as humans if we're looking at this to analyze, much less for the computer to figure it out. So one way that we can prevent our data from being difficult to analyze is to write our questions more precisely and to consider what we want our data to look like before we start collecting. Now, as far as what we want our data to look like, so as far as what we want our data to look like, we want to ask ourselves what type of data it is that we want to collect. Okay. Now, we can also make our questions a little more precise by limiting answers that the respondent can put on their survey. Okay. So let's talk about the types of data that we might want to collect first. So we have 2 types of data. We have quantitative data, and this is data that is expressed in numbers. And we have qualitative data, and this is data that is descriptive. So, for example, the people who responded that their happiness was very happy and not happy at all, these were the people that were using qualitative data since they were describing how happy they were. The person who responded with a 2 for their happiness was most likely using quantitative data. And it says here they were probably using a scale of 1 to 10 to rate their level of happiness. All right. So we could have also used some ways to limit the answers that we received from those who recorded their data. Some of the ways that we could have done that, one way would have been to use drop-down boxes with answer choices. So if we knew that there were only specific responses that were possible for the people to give, we could just go ahead and list those responses in a drop-down box that they could choose from. We could also use multiple choice questions. And so one way we could use multiple choice, we could create a range of numeric values. So maybe like a range of dates or a range of times. So that, it would give them a specific answer that they could choose. Or we could also put possible answers into categories. And I'll show some examples of those in just a second. You could also use yes or no questions or true and false questions. And so obviously if there's a type of question that you would want to ask and there's only two possible answers, you could make that a yes or no question. And you can also use linear scale or rankings. And these are good for people to give their opinion or their attitudes towards something. They could rate them from 1 to 10, or they could rank them in the order of importance or the order that they liked it or what are their feelings about it, whatever. Okay. So let's look at our happiness data collection activity, ways that we could improve those questions. And I use some of those methods that I just talked about, okay? So instead of having them fill out that chart, we could write the individual questions for our survey and give these limited answer choices so that the ways that the person can respond are limited. So one example here is instead of asking them the day or the date or whatever in the chart, this is one of the examples I said I could do a drop-down box. And so I could have them choose the specific date that they would want to respond that they completed that task. And so that way, everybody's answer is in the same format. On this one, I used a multiple choice question. What time did you complete the task? And this is what I was talking about of creating a range of numeric values. So if they completed the task between 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., they could check that spot. Or you see it continues all the way up to 11 p.m. And it's got all these different ranges, okay? So that way they could choose one of these time frames. We don't have to worry about whether they forget to put AM or PM. Instead of having like each individual specific time down to the minute, we can kind of organize them into smaller groups and use that to help us analyze a little better. We can also categorize options. So instead of people being very specific and saying they were washing dishes or doing laundry or cooking or vacuuming or reading a book or playing a video game, you could kind of put these into different categories. And so this one says categorize the task you are completing into one or more of these categories in case they overlapped. But if they were washing dishes, they could mark that option. If they were having to read a book for school, they could mark education and reading. If they were using an electronic device, they might be viewing social media or they might be playing a game. So you could categorize that so that you don't have as much detail on what the task was, and you can kind of use the categories to kind of compare happiness. For instance, if most of us are doing household chores or household cleaning, we're probably not going to be very happy. But if we're getting to spend time with our family or we're communicating with friends and family, we're probably going to be happier, okay? And so we could use that to help us study that. And then I have this example here. So how happy was this person when they were completing the task? Well, I did that example where it was a scale of 1 to 10, where a low number, they were less happy, a higher number, they were more happy. And so then they could choose one of these options to compare their happiness. So by limiting the ways that a person can respond, we can get data that is more easily comparable to each other, which means it's easier to analyze. So things that we could learn from this data, this specific data right here on this data about the happiness, we might could learn which tasks are people happier doing. We might could figure out what time of day people are happier. Or we might could decide which day of the week people are happier, okay? But there's other things that we could learn from this data as well. So I want you to be able to practice this. So let's look at the My Survey Questions activity in your packet. All right, so let's read through the instructions together. So think of something you want to study. Some examples are nutrition, exercise, use of electronic devices, or attitudes about school. You can use one of these examples or you can use a topic of your own. Come up with 5 different questions you could ask in a survey to gather data about your topic. Remember to consider whether you want to collect qualitative or quantitative data and see if there are ways that you can limit the person's responses so that the data is more easily compared. Write out your survey below or on a separate sheet of paper, or if you have access to a computer, you can create your survey in Google Forms. All right, so you guys can complete that activity. I will see you on the next video, which is going to be about different data visualizations.